Good morning. Welcome to our belated second half of our annual meeting. The first half, which was held back in January. So I'll call the meeting to order right now, and let us pray. Holy Father, we thank you for bringing us together on this day to discuss our past and look forward to our future. Lord, let this be a short meeting so that we can enjoy the beautiful day that's waiting for us out there.
Amen.
Amen. John Morgan, are you here?
Put the speaker closer.
John Morgan. I appoint you, John, as clerk for the meeting.
Great.
As for old business, this is what we have already accomplished. Back in January, we did a lot of voting electronically, so your voice was heard in a different manner. We did approve the minutes from the 2019 annual meeting. Not that one wrong. And we had some elections. We elected 3 persons to be delegates to the Diocesan Convention: Dave Stein, Don Ingersoll, and Alice Moss. And Ken Fear is our alternate. We prepared a slate and the congregation accepted it. We have gone to a 9-member vestry instead of 12. And the new candidates, the new vestry members coming on board are Paula Somerville and Alice Moss. And again, the parish voted for that slate of candidates. We had a committee composed of Don Ingersoll, Phil Pierce, Cheryl Schmidt, Gretchen Waters, and myself. And we sat down and reviewed the old bylaws. We updated them and made them more pertinent, more current to what we're doing today. Again, that was an item that was voted on by the parish and was accepted. And at this point, I will turn this over to Phil Pierce, our treasurer.
Good morning. I have the advantage of running the cameras, so I have the focus there, not here. The numbers you have seen in the reports that were sent out for last year, and I will hit those just very quickly. We did have a surplus last year. If you go to the next slide, Dave. We had a surplus last year of about $42,000, not unexpected because we did not at that time yet have a full-time priest on board. The vestry was offered options as far as how to handle that accrued surplus. The decision was made to keep up the capital reserves this year, which was necessary because we've had quite a bit of expense in necessary repairs. Over the last year, so that has been put into some of the designated funds. Go on to the next one. The balance sheet right now is fairly straightforward. We have in total about $520,000 in assets as of the close of last year. Roughly 190 of that is in our endowment fund, which is a mixed asset portfolio. The remainder is in cash accounts with our banks. And we have about 5,000 with the interfaith fund. That's the old McGee fund, for those of you who may remember back that far. It funds inner city microloans, and we continue to keep a $5,000 amount in there. Go on to the designated accounts, please. Those are the main areas where we have our designated funds. And again, just as a reminder, we keep 2 basic funds. One is the operating account, from which we pay regular, ongoing annual expenses, and into which your pledges and other miscellaneous revenues, which last year were minimal, go. Then we have our designated accounts, which are those funds we've set aside and targeted, earmarked for specific purposes. Most of those are financial accounts. For example, folks that decide to prepay their pledges, we hold in that and we disperse it 12th out as a monthly income. There's the capital reserves. There are other elements like that. And right now, we have, as I say, about $202,000 in those miscellaneous designated accounts. Go to the next one on endowment funds. There's the endowment fund results for the year. We ended including the monies that are in the endowment holding designated account. That's where we actually pay current grants from, of about $210,000. One of the changes that we made last year, two changes. One, we moved our endowment fund assets to a series of Vanguard mutual fund and ETF funds. The reason we did that was to coincide with the decisions made by the diocese to do the same thing for their growth and income fund, because there was a very large decision made at the diocese level, at the national level, that encouraged dioceses and parishes to invest in socially responsible, or what are called ESG funds. Let's take a look at that next slide. I can explain what that means. ESG in the current parlance means environmental, social, and governance policies. Some of you may have heard this has to be called socially responsible investments. And those have been around for 2 or 3 decades. But many socially responsible funds were not always the best returning. So it was always a decision that large institutions or churches had to make. Do we go for the best possible return, or do we invest in a socially responsible type of balance? Virginia?
I just want to say that mutual funds are doing that.
Well, it depends on the mutual fund. And the question, Georgiana, and I'm going to repeat the question so
I feel in individual stocks and I may not.
we may want to have you on the endowment fund. I'm going to repeat the questions because unfortunately the folks at home watching can't hear from the audience. Georgiana was asking, just commenting that mutual funds haven't done that well, and some, in fact, have not. One of the things that the diocese has done, and what we have done, is to invest in what are called index funds. In other words, they are set up in such a way as to mirror the indexes that we commonly hear about, the S&P 500, certain bond funds, et cetera. So they're not meant to be overly aggressive, they're not meant to be overly conservative, they're meant to get the market. That's number one. Number two, our portfolio is diversified. We're not 100% stock, we're not 100% bond, and we're certainly not 100% cash, which is getting nothing these days. It's a mix. And the endowment fund cycle policy allows us to move some of those assets a little bit depending on how economic conditions are playing. But the key thing is we don't move a whole lot at a whole lot of time. We're not trying to play the market. We're not trying to be technical advisors. We're trying to make sure that our endowment fund grows at a reasonable rate and is at least protected against inflation. Yes, Georgiana, any question?
Okay, my mother had treasuries for a long time. They weren't making any money. I got rid of the treasuries, put them in the stock market.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Georgiana was indicating the treasuries have had a difficult run, and that is in fact true. Long-term treasuries over the last 10 years, 10-year treasuries, I should say, so far this year are down about 16 to 18%. That's mostly because interest rates are so low right now, short-term investments in bonds and stocks look a whole lot better. So one of the things we do, the endowment committee looks very carefully at our portfolio and makes adjustments or just monitors returns. And I send to them every month a detailed analysis. But one thing I just want to highlight, I'm going to get to the performance return in a second, is that idea of environmental and social governance. It's actually a pretty important thing. A lot of us are very concerned about the types of investments that church assets are in, to make sure that they're not invested in those companies or those regions that perhaps are pursuing policies either in their corporate structure or in their governance. It just doesn't quite fit with our frame of mind, our desires. So these ESG funds are carefully screened to make sure that they set very specific criteria. The good thing is nowadays, most major mutual companies, Fidelity, Vanguard, most brokerage firms, there's a broad number of those ESG funds out there, and some of them perform very, very well, at least in line with other funds. So the availability of those kind of investments, even in the bond market, which is really difficult to do, are in line with those ESG standards. And all of our assets are in ESG stock or bond funds. So that's a good takeaway and some peace of mind. Go to the next one, I'll show you. What was interesting, and one thing I've been tracking for the vestry and for the endowment committee is how our different asset classes have in fact performed on a month-by-month basis. If you take a look at the slide here, you'll see the red line taking a big hit in March. That's the stock market. Not a surprise there. It took a big hit during the initial COVID impact, and in March, April, really through May, it was a difficult market. Now, from that point to today, it's got a significant comeback and gain. We are not 100% in the stock market. We're also not 100% in the bond market or other types of investments. So the intention is that our portfolio moves in between those. And as a result, for the whole year of 2020, in spite of the economic impact of the COVID pandemic, we actually had a 15% overall return, which is pretty good, even in most ordinary years. But that's just a reflection. The one thing I keep highlighting to investment reports, expect a lot of volatility. That's just the name of the game right now. There are so many economic uncertainties, whether they're political or economic or medical these days, that you have to think of the ability to be able to weather those kinds of items out. But the good news is that endowment fund is strong. In fact, last week it actually ticked up to 200,000 total. It's been wavering right around that piece of it. Any questions more on the financials from last year? Let's take a quick look at the budget. You've already seen it. You've already approved it. And not to steal Dave's thunder, but there was a very large push last year to support the operational budget for this year in anticipation of our going aggressively after a new full-time rector, or priest, I should say. And as you will recall, a lot of us were urged to think seriously about the pledges and try to target those. The response was phenomenal from everybody in the room and beyond. We increased our overall pledge giving more than any other single year that I could track back in St. Stephen's history. You've got to go back to the founding years when it was everybody pitched into the place going, but there was just an amazing response that all of you deserve so much credit for. And as a result, we were able to achieve the targeted budget for this year that we hope to have, so that we could go back to the diocese with a straight face and a full-throated voice and say, we have set up the financials sufficient to be able to hire and fully fund the full-time priest here at St. Stephen's. And we're operating on that basis right now. If you go to the budget for this year, okay, that's it. That's it there. And there you can see it line by line. There is anticipation. I would show you that if you look at the top line, which is the clergy expense, those were fairly low for the 2020 year, and that reflects what our compensation has been to Sharon. We have had a great advantage in having Sharon in so many ways, but financially, it's going to be said to the parish. Thank you very much. We have put in the budget, obviously, a higher anticipated figure for that, because our plan was that at some point during the year, I think we originally thought July 1, but that may move a little bit, we would have a full-time person on board. So we're kind of pre-anticipating what those additional costs are going to be. One good thing is that in those designated funds, the biggest single one of those designated funds is a mission development fund. It's not really allocated to furnaces or parking lot improvements or what have you. It is something we have put together over time through our surplus budgets so that we have the ability to back up the operational budget if we need to for those types of expenses to regenerate the parish. So we're in good operation. I can tell you, since we already have the first 4 months put together, that we're still operating in a budget surplus. Again, not too surprising because we don't have that additional expense in right now, but we're in a good position for this year and for next year, as far as we can tell, to be able to support that cost when it comes available. The last item was you were asked to endorse the budget. That has been formally done, so as I say, it is in place and moving on. Okay, any other questions? Oh, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Ready to say that 2020 was an interesting year. Can you all hear me? No?
No, tip it down a little. Yeah.
Okay, 2020, what a year. Aren't we glad it's done? Hopefully we'll never come back again. What did the coronavirus do to us? Just about everything it could. Closed us down, shut our doors, kicked all the office staff out of the office and into their homes. We worked remotely, which, as you can probably imagine, was quite an adventure. I know myself, working at home, every resource I needed was back here at the office, and that was not a pretty thing. But we managed to get through it. As far as worship goes, we stepped into the electronic age, or maybe I should say we stumbled into the electronic age. With Phil's expertise, we were able to maintain some sort of worship on Sundays. We were able to do our weeknight conference services, Monday through Friday, every night, 9 o'clock, still continues. From my own home on early Sunday mornings at 7:30, we did prayer and sermon. And then we did our 10 o'clock service here through the expertise of Phil. It was interesting. I think we've all learned a whole lot. And I just hope that those services that we were able to put together did something to keep us all together. Of course, during COVID, we couldn't do any pastoral visits, couldn't go to hospitals, couldn't go to private homes. It was a frustrating year, speaking as a priest. Some of the activities that we had already started had to be put on hold. Our confirmation classes, our wonderful Lent madness that we used to do during Lent. And I was working to establish a service time at American House, and hopefully we'll be picking up on that again. And then I had started dialogue with our neighbor across the street, Pastor Nick Shellac. We put that on hold, and this past week, calendar's fun. Dave and I went over and we talked with Pastor Nick and one of his administrative staff about reinventing ourselves, about creating a relationship between our two churches, because we do have so much in common. So there will be more coming forth on that, so keep an ear open, worship-wise and socially. So good things are coming. So we talked about the electronic age. Hey, we're done with that. It's all good, aren't they? Well, one thing that I would like to say is that throughout COVID, your vestry kept meeting every month. They didn't slack off. They were Johnny on the spot. We got a lot of work done. And without the vestry and their leadership, we would have been in a lot of trouble as far as keeping the congregation together. And I've just been so blessed to have a congregation and leadership like this. And let's keep that going. So to finish up my rector's report, I will say that this is an amazing congregation. Our outreach efforts are absolutely fantastic. We do so much for people who are less fortunate than we are. But there is more for us to do. We need to get out into our community and let people know that we're here. And we have to let people know why St. Stephen's is our church of choice. So I think in the year to come, it's going to be a year of rebirth, more self-evaluation, and just getting out into the community and introducing ourselves and finding out what it is we can do for our community. And hopefully our community will come and find out what they can do for us. So I would like to recognize our vestry. In 2020, those persons whose terms expired were Pat Wojcik, Dave Eldon, Corrine Fragnoli, and Gretchen Waters. And I want to thank each and every one of them for their service over the past years. Are these expiration dates?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay, those vestry members whose terms will be expiring this year are Dave Stein, our senior warden, Ken Fuhr, our junior warden, Miranda Spates, and Kathy DeSantis. Thank you for your service. You're not done yet, but thank you. And those terms that will be expiring in 2022, next year, are Don Ingersoll, Joan Morgan, Amy Redmer, and Cheryl Schmidt. So I thank you for your volunteer and everything that you have done while you've been on vestry. And now we come to the Treasury Department. Our Finance Committee Chair is Don Ingersoll, our Treasurer, Phil Pierce, and our incredible parish bookkeeper, Pam Bonkowski. Without them, we would all be sunk in the ship. They do a fantastic job. And I don't want to say they're irreplaceable, but they're darn hard. They would be darn hard to replace. Our office staff and our volunteers, Amy O'Neill. Let me tell you about this woman. She's one step ahead of me every single time I turn around. And it's a little annoying that she's always right. I thank Amy from my heart. She does a wonderful job, and she's another one of those that is very, very difficult to replace. Sue Gore, what can you say about Sue Gore? She has kept us afloat with music during COVID. She has done a wonderful job. You know, since we've been back in this building, we can't sing. Although I do think I have heard voices singing. And I actually caught myself singing with my mic on, I think it was last week. But anyway, Sue has given us some diverse music, and it's been wonderful. And she continues to do a fantastic job. So, Sue, we thank you. And we have an invisible person in our staff, and that would be Maddie Barr. Maddie is our social media intern. She has done miracles. A young lady, she's a student at Oakland University, and she is working on our website, on anything social media, and she's incredible. Another hard to replace person. So she's graduating this year, but I understand she's not leaving the area. So we're going to hang on to her as long as we possibly can. I'd also like to recognize Rob Redmer as witness editor. Rob does an incredible job with that publication. I can't say enough good things. The witness goes to the diocese. It's mailed to the diocese. And they say that that's a darn nice publication. And they appreciate the effort that we put into that to reach out to everyone. So Rob, thank you. You've done a great job. And then we come to our audiovisual IT experts, Phil Pierce and Justin Wojcik. I know nothing about this electronic stuff, so I'm always amazed at what can be done because I can't do it. And these guys, whatever kind of problem we have, they seem to be able to solve it. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. And then we go further. The people who have given their time to make our services meaningful to all of us. And I'm not going to call these out by name because I would call out everybody's name. The choir, the Eucharistic ministers, the acolytes, the ushers, the counters, the greeters, and scanners, the altar guild, our parish gardener, and every committee chair that we have in this building. Thank you all. We couldn't do what we do without you. So I applaud you. And then we have the Clydesdales. Without these guys, there's a heck of a lot of stuff that wouldn't get done. And this isn't the easy stuff. This is the heavy load that they pull. Pat Wojcik, Dave Eldon. You take care of our buildings and grounds. You take care of our furnaces and our AC units. You take care of our lights. Anything in our building that needs to be done, you guys do it. And you've done an incredible job. And you've saved us a heck of a lot of money by being very vigilant over the contracts that we have been looking at. So I thank you. Job well done. And last but not least, I want to say thank you to everybody. You've done a spectacular job. You've hung together here. We're a great family, and I'm just truly blessed to be here and to participate in this. And I thank you.
I want to make sure you hear me. In case you don't know who I am, I'm Dave Stein. And as Sharon said, we had started out the year with such promise, and then COVID hit. And vestry was suddenly consumed with a whole new set of problems you could never have imagined. Writing COVID reentry plans, submitting them to the diocese for approval, trying to figure out how do we do remote pastoral care, streaming, meetings online, remote hands-off outreach, creating a virtual presence. But in spite of that, we managed to get a heck of a lot done last year. For ourselves, we set 3 major goals. Worship and technology. That might seem obvious, but at that time it wasn't. How do we incorporate and leverage technology in our worships? How do we invent new ways to do the worship, remote and so forth? That was a major focus for last year, and I think will continue going forward. Communications and public relations. Communications to all of you about what's going on here in the diocese with COVID and our parish life together, as well as Sharon's mentioned many times over the years, we need a larger presence in our community. How do we do that? Public relations. So we began exploring some ideas about how do we get our presence known? How do we get ourselves out into the community, force ourselves outside of our parish? And of course, outreach efforts. Again, how do we do that hands off? How do we do that in a remote environment? Where do we put that where it can be used the most? So I'm going to touch on each of these a little bit, if I can get my pointer back where it needs to go, and I didn't advance that slide. Okay, worship and technology initiatives. We've mentioned Maddie Barr. She's been integral to this process. You can see here all the things she's accomplished for us. YouTube channels, Facebook pages, private and public, Instagram, Pinterest, every weeknight compline on Facebook. Initially, Sharon had to be in front of her phone at 9 o'clock every night doing compline. Think about that. 5 days a week, every week of the year. Where are you going to be? At your desk, in front of your phone, doing compline. I couldn't do that. Sharon did that for months. And finally, Maddie figured out a way that we could pre-record those. And that freed Sharon back up to have a normal life. Don't tell people that, I guess. Sunday streaming services, we've mentioned Phil's extremely phenomenal work that he's done for us and continues to do for us. Every week, you may not know it, but there's something improved. I'll guarantee it. Plus, Maddie worked on our website and improved the design of that tremendously. Communications and public relations. We made a beginning. We stepped up our communications, both from the rector and myself. Hopefully you've been reading The Witness. Routine pastoral communications with the Homebound has been improved. Our Pastoral Care Committee and other helpers have made sure we've made contact with any homebound person. We had initially a plan to go into those situations and make sure they had online streaming capability, but we were denied access by the facility, so we couldn't go in and do that. But we still have that as a goal, to help put in the technology for our parishioners where they need it so they can live stream when they can't come to the services. Our communications and public relations next steps. As I mentioned, Wi-Fi communications with our homebound. Further engage with and connect with our digital members. We've got a one-way communication going right now. We need to figure out how to make that a two-way communication with those digital members. We've been working to connect with Oakland University student groups. Maddie's going to Oakland University. She's well aware of what student organizations are there. And we've been working with her to start to filter out where we might fit, where we might find a mutual goal that we can leverage into more help with us, maybe drawing from a new youth population to come to St. Stephen's. Obviously, COVID put a big hampering effect on that, but Maddie has begun to go to some of those meetings and talk to those people about what's going on here. As Sharon mentioned, we would like to establish joint ministries with Beautiful Savior across the street, and her and I are putting together a schedule to go meet local community leaders and ask the question, what can St. Stephen's do for you? Where are your needs? How can we help you accomplish the goals for our community? Somehow I'm back at a treasurer's report here. Reinventing Outreach. As Sharon said, this was absolutely amazing this year. And I knew it was amazing through the year as I was going to vestry meetings and hearing, but then when I sat down and looked at the list that Joan put together for me for the annual meeting, it actually blew my socks off. Just look at the things we did. In-kind donations to Lighthouse exceeded $12,000 last year. Collected by returnable cans and bottles. I'll tell you, I had my share of beer cans in that. We collected over $6,000 for SOS since we couldn't host SOS. We donated $8,500 to fill a variety of local needs. Baldwin Center, Bishop's COVID Fund, Beaumont Health Foundation, Samaritan's House, Troy People Concerned, CCRT, to mention a few. We donated food at Thanksgiving for Lighthouse, as had been our tradition. We sponsored 2 families at Christmas. We did a virtual Advent by candlelight and donated over $500 worth of baby supplies to Haven. We sponsored students at Bound Together, did a virtual Christmas giving tree, and maxed out the requests. That was really clever, how that happened. And I give Amy Redmer and Linda Pierce credit for inventing a way to do that online for us. We had volunteers that participated in a food drive, by handout with Forgotten Harvest and Crossroads. It doesn't end here. If I can get this thing to forward. I gotta remember to do that. Crafting Kindness. Donated over 1,425 crafted items this past year. Over 1,000 face masks were made and given to Baldwin Center, hospitals, doctors' offices, and individuals. Military boxes with craft quilts. Christmas stockings with personal hygiene items to St. Matthew and St. Joseph Episcopal Church and to our own seniors. Teddy bears were sewn and delivered to doctors' offices to use with children. And over 65 preemie baby caps were made for U of M Mott Children's Hospital. In spite of COVID, that's what we did. As I said, amazing outreach. To quote Joan Morgan, we are a small but a mighty group. Now, I'm going to embarrass Joan a minute. I wrote a check. I delivered things. I gave beer cans. I did outreach. But if you came here on a snowy winter's night about 7 o'clock, this little car would pull up in front of the doors. Joan would get out. And she'd pick up what was here, and she'd take it where it was needed. The checks you wrote, Joan called Lighthouse, asked Lighthouse what she needed to buy for them that week, bought it, and took it there. Joan is passionate about outreach, and it's benefited us all this past year. Joan, thank you so much. And thank everybody for what they've done to make our outreach programs what they are. We also had a year of amazing stewardship, as Phil said. We set a very aggressive goal for ourselves. We wanted to hit $303,000 in giving for this year's budget, 22% over what we expected last year's results to be. We were looking for a majority voting yes to hire and support a full-time priest. Pretty aggressive goals, to say the least. The results were that we did make over $300,000 pledged in gifts, only $3,000 short of our goal. We received pledges increases of over 19%. 70% increased their pledges this last year. 53% increased their pledges more than 15%, and 38% increased their pledges more than 22%. 53% of us voted to hire and financially support a full-time priest. I think that's pretty amazing. And to thank you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your generous and giving hearts, your time, your touch, and yes, your financial commitment as well. Turn it over to Ken for a report on our priest.
Thanks, Dave. So just to review a couple of things that you know, I had sent out a letter and there have been some announcements, but we're calling a priest in charge. The difference between a priest in charge and a rector is a rector comes in right off the bat with the sort of full permanent authority. A priest in charge comes in on the understanding that they're going to be there for a number of years. That exact amount of time is kind of determined after a couple of years. An example would be Reverend Eric Williams in Rochester at St. Philip's, right, who was there as priest in charge for a couple years, then became their rector. So that's the design that we've sort of been working under from the beginning. We have a very active and ongoing search. There's enthusiastic support from the bishop and her staff, specifically Reverend Ellen Ekavog, who's the ministry development person. She's been very active, not only in helping make sure our message gets out, but also in helping make sure that the message that we had to communicate was well designed, well put together, and quite a group effort on that. Got rave reviews by the diocese once we had that final package ready to go. And most importantly, it's had some strong effect once it was published. We updated all those things and listed the position for 8 weeks. That position listing ended May 1st. So as of May 1st, we were all anxiously awaiting to see, okay, there'd be a person, would somebody, maybe two, because we were going to get any candidates that were that applied, if you will, and that were appropriately vetted by the bishop, which means she calls their bishop and they make sure things are kosher, as they say, and then off they go and they send us that information. So we have several candidates seeking the position. We're proceeding with initial interviews via Zoom and also some in-person meetings, but definitely in-person meetings and visits follow once we've narrowed that down to the candidates that we feel would be most appropriate. So, as has been said numerous times, and we exhibited this morning, prayer is absolutely critical. This is the time to be praying. It's always been the time to be praying about this, but now especially because we are, actually going to be meeting with people, talking with people, and we really appreciate those prayers. And I'd just like to recognize the committee, Steve Fragnoli, Sandy Josie, Alice Moss, Miranda Spates, and Carol Sprague for their efforts. Thank you.
Any questions for Ken before we move on? Okay, good. So, we talked about last year. We did a lot of good things last year. But last year was just setting the table for this year and next year. So where do we go from here? What's our mission? What is it that we, as St. Stephen's, think we're called to do? Well, you've probably, again, if you've read The Witness, you've heard me talk about St. Stephen's as a community center. It's the center of our community. This last year, we've been forced away from our community center. We need to come back. We need to re-engage together. We need to reconnect in person. And we need to hold hands and begin to do the work again we were called to do with hands-on ministry in our community. We need more members, younger members. The best place to draw those people are from our community. That means going out and meeting them where they are, not asking them to come meet us where we are. And the best way to get their attention, to make them aware we're here and let them know what we're about. Not just as a church. They all get that. They understand what a church is. Sometimes we have to overcome that. But more importantly, what we are as a community, what we share, what we can give. So, reconnecting with each other. As I mentioned, we need to get back to coming to church on Sundays, social gatherings. We need to create opportunities to meet each other and reminisce about where we've been, talk about where we want to go, share the disappointments and the joys from the last year, comfort each other for those that have had a loss from this last year. Small groups. We don't all have to get together all at the same time. We could all get together in small groups. Invent a reason to get together as a small group. We have a fire pit out back that people could sit around and chat, have a Bible study, get a euchre game going, for God's sake. Anything. Get together. Our committees must be active committees. We can't be a passive behind-the-scene committee. We need to have committees that meet. Even if that meeting doesn't have a real pressing agenda, but it gets us meeting. It gets us having a cup of coffee and a cookie together to talk about our lives together. And we need to connect with our homebound members. And I have to applaud Miranda and others for the work that's been done in this area this past year. I feel we are probably more connected now to our homebound members than we ever have been in my time here, which is becoming considerable. Again, connecting to our local communities. We need to visit local city offices, community centers, etc., and talk about what St. Stephen's has to offer. And more importantly, ask them what it is they need us to do for them. We need to invite community participation to our events. There's nothing that says Irish Night is a parish member only event, for instance. There's nothing that says the youth auction is a parish only event. Invite people to come to those things. And they don't have to be a particularly close friend, just a neighbor. We need to get that published that we're doing those things. And again, we need to further develop our online communications, finding the way that makes that two-way communication. That's the difficult challenge. It's easy to broadcast. Everybody knows how to get their opinion out there. God forbid we see that so much. But how do we engage with those people? How do we make that a two-way communication that invites them in, that draws them closer to actually making that bold step to meet us in person? That's the challenge of the social media venue. Pastoral care. We're now thinking about pastoral care in a much broader sense than just a committee that does the traditional kinds of pastoral care, Eucharistic visitations, and visiting the sick and infirm, typically the priest's job. Pastoral care here has grown much beyond that already, and we need to continue to expand that. Let's face it, we're all aging. we're all less mobile than we were before. And we have other people in our congregation that are already reached the point where they're forced to stay home on Sundays. We want to stay connected to them. We want to stay engaged with them in community. We've started a mailing ministry. Those of you that have had a birthday this year already have hopefully gotten a birthday card. Get well cards are being sent to parishioners. Thoughtful cards are being sent for parishioners when we think they need it. We're looking for opportunities to let seniors know we can drive them where they need to go if that's needed. We're developing and investing in this idea of parish neighborhoods, where we're not thinking about, as I said, the whole collective group of us, but smaller groups, kind of greed-eating meat on steroids, if you will, where we find a reason to get groups together when it's convenient for them, not just necessarily for faith education, but to share, commune together, and hopefully say a prayer too. And again, I talk about this online connectivity. There's a lot of pastoral care that can be done online to people who need it. I think Sharon could tell you stories about people who have listened to her Compline or her 7:30 service and commented to her how that helped them through that day. That's another important part of pastoral care for the future. So we've got work to do. We've got eager hands to do it. Vestry is working on all of these things forward. I can't find my mouse. There it is. So we've got a good year planned. I'm excited about what Ken's telling us about our priests. Keep your pledges up and keep coming to church. Are there any thoughts, comments, reflections before we close the meeting out today? Really? Cool. Diane. Yeah, Diane wants to mention that we want to thank whoever got the arrangements for the tent to happen. And you have to thank Alice Moss and her friend for that. This lady had a need for a place to have her gymnastics class. We happen to have a parking lot. And the two things merged together, and it was a God's gift for us. It worked out so good through those few months that we had it. So yeah, that was really a blessing that fell in our laps, literally. So, anything else? Diane? Okay, a bit of housekeeping. Anything else? Alice? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, good thought. That gives me a chance to announce that we're having the annual picnic this year. Alice is asking if it wouldn't be a good idea to make our picnic more visible for neighbors by having it out in the parking lot where people driving by can see what we're doing and that we're actually having fun together. I think that's a great idea, and we should talk about that at Vestry tomorrow night. Put it on your calendar. Sunday, June 16th is the annual picnic, and hopefully everybody will come and share that time of fellowship with us. Pardon me? 13th. One year it was on the 16th somewhere. Okay. Is that it? Good. Okay, well, I personally want to thank you for all the help you've given me and the vestry this past year and support. It's been, as Sharon said, an interesting year, but it's been a phenomenal year at the same time. In spite of COVID, we accomplished so much. And I think we're in a good place to go forward from here. So again, I want to thank you for that. Sharon, I'll let you do the closing prayer. Gotta get to the right slide or we can't do it.
Let us pray. Holy and gracious God, you've brought us here today to review our past year with all of its troubles, with all of its successes, and with all of the new paths that you've given us to travel on. We ask now that you send us out to do this work you've given us to do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If there are no objections, I will adjourn this meeting. See you next year.